Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar's VENZA webinar. Daniel Johnson from the VENZA Dutch office here in the Netherlands, here in Den Haag. Don't want to confuse things because we have somebody else that's also here in the Netherlands, but glad you're here. Thank you for being present to this this important webinar on the topic of email threat protection and hospitality. We have an all-star cast of presenters and industry experts here. I will do a quick introduction and then let Marco take over. He's going to be doing the presentation, starting with Marco Correia with T Hotels. He's the partner there and a longtime friend of VENZA. Marco, fantastic. Glad to have you with us running the show today. And also joining Marco on the presentation side, Michael Posey from AppRiver. He's the channel sales engineer. So his first time on a webinar. Michael, so glad to have you. He's calling in from the US of A. I forgot to mention that Marco was there. You're in Cascais today, Marco? Yes,
in Portugal, yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Also in Portugal, one of our friends in the industry, our industry expert, one of two industry experts on the call today. We've got Noah Conceição with JJW Hotels and Resorts. Noah, so thankful that you joining us despite being on your week holiday. So that is dedication to the industry, my man. Fantastic.
Yeah, hello everybody.
Good to have you, Noah. And then also joining us, last but not least, Dominic Boer from Lore. It's your official title is Director of IT. Is that correct? Or am I getting
That's correct, Daniel.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Dominic is joining us also from the Netherlands, just down the road in Amsterdam. So glad to have you gentlemen keeping us honest, your perspective on what's happening in the industry and whether or not the things shared resonate is, that's why you're here. So very grateful for you to take time and be here with us. So without further ado, Sean Shields, who's our producer, is joining us as well. Sean and I were going to keep a lookout for any questions that people have. So if you do have questions, any thoughts, any comments, we'll keep an eye out there in the chat window. So if you've got anything, those of you that are attending, anything that you want to ask of either the presenters or the industry experts, please put that in the chat window. So we'll watch for that, and we will try to get Marco on the way. Anything else, Sean, that I'm thinking about in terms of? Oh, one other thing I want to mention. This is being recorded, and so if you hear a nugget of information that you want to hear again, or of course if you want to share it with your colleagues in the industry, we'd love that. So that will be we will take that recording and put it up on our resources page at venzagroup.com. Great. I think that's all the kind of housekeeping stuff. Marco, it's all you.
Hello. Thank you. And thanks, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. And I would like to start to tell why this webinar started. And me and Daniel, we are doing some research about cybersecurity and about managed security providers and how to adapt the VENZA offering now you're in Europe. And we went through all the industry reports, Verizon, AppRiver, and many others. And we detected two things. One is called the good news, the other one is the bad news. Good news. Our industry that has been a victim of point-of-sale attacks for many, many years, are you seeing finally this number decreasing? So, and we can speak about that later if there is time. But on the other hand, and this is something that's the subject of our webinar today, is the fact that business email compromises are increasing in numbers year over year and getting more and more sophisticated. And we were surprised for that because we are used to spam and we are used to managerial schemes attacks, but this is different. And it's important to say DC is a target attack. It's something that a criminal organization does in order to obtain financial advantage from a company. And it's not to take lightly. The numbers from the FBI, so good source, say that since 2013, it's been raising and accounted to about $26 billion of lost money from companies in over 160,000 attacks since 2013. Just maybe you guys don't remember, the most notorious last year was an attack on a Toyota dealership in the United States, where they lost just $37 million in one go. So this is something that is emerging and emerging.
Yeah.
But we went deeper, we went to analyze it. At the end of the day, all of us in the corporate world, we have seen attacks to our networks, people trying to ask for money transfers, saying they are the CEO and all that stuff. So what we have found is there is three types of threats that are increasing in frequency and above all in sophistication. This is really, really important. So living off the land is something that we have seen. That is basically the bad actors are trying to use legitimate services like Dropbox, like OneDrive, to steal credentials and therefore getting access to your accounts. What's new, and on this one, and I will not ask Michael to complement, but is they are now using also what is called permission phishing. That is basically they're using the OAuth protocol APIs to get access to your mailbox, and not only because you get permissions to give away your files, your mailbox, your contacts, and this is something that is increasing. The second point, and the second area where we see more and more, and I don't know if you have heard the news about the Ritz London yesterday, but it's impersonation. Okay. So these actors are getting more and more sophisticated. They move from I am the CIO, transfer me $10 million, that is something, to basically diverting detection to other channels, trying to move the target from email conversations to SMS conversations, for instance. Also using supply chain attacks, for instance, instead of attacking directly a company, they attack a vendor, and then they find a way to ask for bank details changes, and so they collect the money for due invoices, for instance. So another interesting thing that I'm very curious about the data breach in Ritz London is not proved yet that the business email compromise, but the level of sophistication and of the attack is very interesting, because the criminals, they called the clients saying they were the hotel, spoofing the ID of the phone of the hotel. A really fascinating subject, but still very, very new. Hopefully in the next webinar we'll have more news about that. And the latest one, and this is one that I find more concerning and that we are at a bigger risk, is ransomware. Ransomware is here since ever, but since November last year, a new type of ransomware appears. The first instance is called as Maze ransomware. And what it does, well, before encrypting the files and making systems unavailable, it does exfiltration of data, valuable data like PII or PCI data. So we will force, or we'll give more arguments for the targets to pay the ransom, because it's not only about can I get my systems back, because if you have a good backup policy, well, with a lot of pain, but you can do it. But if they have your own data and they are targeting to sell it on the dark web, that's a different story. So at the end of the day, the question is what this does. Why is hospitals get targeted? Why is hospitals should be concerned? Well, one simple fact, or two simple facts. First fact, we are still one of the three top industries that suffer data breaches all over the world. We always go for the gold, at least the bronze medal in the data breach Olympics, at least. And the second one is that this industry has seen a massive move from email on-prem or self-hosted email systems to cloud-based software as a service, with a big prevalence of Office 365, now called Microsoft 365, but let's call it Office 365 because I'm still an old guy and I have difficulties in changing names as frequently as Microsoft changes names or licensing terms. So, and Office 365 is a great product as a productivity tool, no doubts about that, but there's some security flaws. It doesn't contain advanced security mechanism. That is an add-on. It's called ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, and that you have to pay for it. And even if you pay for it and you will basically have to manage on your own. It's not a managed service. So I'm just not me only speaking nonstop. I have a question for Noe and for Dominic. What do you guys use as email platforms? Noe, you want to start?
Yeah, well, we use Microsoft Exchange hosted, and then we also use Anubis as a T-spam. Around 80% of the email gets automatically discarded, and then 5% it's email that still need to be checked by our analysts in the help desk, and so let's say 90% of the email is almost discarded from the total.
Okay.
Thank
you. And you, Dominic?
We use Office 365. And then for email security, we use Trend Micro to quarantine any spam or emails. But unfortunately, sometimes, sorry?
No, I was saying we have here two flavors of the Microsoft platform, one self-hosted or hosted, the other one on 365. I hope you don't get scared by what I was saying about Office 365, but it's it's any software platform that is exposed to the internet. We cannot play around with it. That's the reality. But so now the question is, what can we do as an industry to prevent that? That I think it all starts with the layer security approach. That is best practice, right? So you have to use multiple tools to complement different vectors to protect against different vectors of attack. If you think about email security, but I think you have to have a good brand defense, have proper defensive email domain name registration. You need to get your best practices in order. You need to have your SPF, your DKIM, and your DMARC. And DMARC is an interesting thing because studies show that around 79% of the companies don't use it. That's crazy, but that's a fact. And above all, and this is above all, there is two things that you need to do. A study by Okta says that regardless of the platform, around 9 to 10% of filters fail and messages get through. So you need to keep your staff trained and need to build your associates to be the human firewall, number one. If you don't train people, you can put as good technology as you want. They are the weakest link. And the second one, and Michael, I'm going to ask you briefly is to get a great, modern, enterprise-grade email threat protection, like AppRiver, so that as that VENZA is using as their weapons against criminals in their managed service provider that's based out of Pensacola, United States. So, Michael, can you, in a nutshell, speak to me about AppRiver? What are really the great features that you need to look for a modern email threat protection platform?
Yep, absolutely. I think whenever you look at a platform, and as you alluded to earlier, there's lots of tools that are out there that do a great job. And I think it's pretty important that when you look at some sort of security appliance, unless you really want to spend hours a day monitoring this and sending emails to this system or have people reviewing these systems, it's important to find a service that can earn your trust and take these systems and these messages that are coming in and identify them accurately, securely, so that you and your IT staff don't have to spend hours a day peering through these. I think what Noah had said earlier, 5% of the messages that were coming in that his help desk still have to kind of, look at and gauge themselves. But I agree with them completely. That's about what we see. Anywhere between 90 to 95% of all mail still tends to be bad. And even since, if you look at some of the numbers that come up since the pandemic hit the world, I think the average that we've seen is over 660% increase in malware and phishing attacks. And in phishing alone, it's over 350% related to COVID alone. So when you look at those numbers, yeah.
I want to hear that again. Since the pandemic, you've seen a 600 and how many?
I just got the numbers again today. 667% increase in cyber attacks since beginning of the year. Just an increase alone. And over 350% of it is.
Did we lose Michael?
I think the sound.
Oh, I think you're on mute there, Michael. That's how he rolls. He drops a huge statistic on us, and then, and then we're all like, "What?"
Well, Michael doesn't.
He's self-muted.
It looks like he's frozen for a second. Well, while he's frozen on that subject, I wonder, Noah, Dominic, have you guys seen a higher volume of security events at JGW and Lore? I mean, what's
what we noticed is the attacks are quite specific these days. They look and explore exactly our booking engines, for example, and trying to send direct emails for the people that could provide their passwords, or we receive a lot of threats from that type of sort. And I agree that one of the issues that we find every day in this industry is that people normally the workers, they don't get as much training as they should. So it's one of the issues that we find out. Also the staff rotation, even if we train people, probably in 6 months, we will have a lot of new colleagues that will not know how to use the platforms and what type of information should use and how to share it. So there is a lot of issues in that sense. But we noticed that the attacks that we are receiving are quite specific these days, not as generic as before, but quite specific to get specific information.
Yeah. So it's pretty kind of similar then to what the Ritz London succumbed to yesterday, right? What we found out about yesterday. How about you, Dominic?
Well, me personally, I haven't seen an increase just yet, but it's always been there, and that's why that user awareness is so important there on what to look for, because sometimes something slips through the crack, and then it all comes down to user awareness. And luckily, so far, people have always been on top of it, and also communicated to the IT managers that they can internally then show these threats to further educate the people with the specific examples of what's coming in. But I haven't seen a real increase yet.
Okay, thank you. Well, Daniel, while Michael is reconnecting, but since we are in the pandemic subject, I have a question both for Noah and for Dominic. That is, with the mobile workforce and people working for home, your cybersecurity paradigm has changed. No, and not just being specific about email, but on the whole, how did you guys adapt your cybersecurity to a remote workforce using unsecure networks, many times their own devices? How did you react to that? How tough it was? Dominic, want to start, please?
Yeah. So of course things have changed, but we don't allow people to use their own devices. That's just being blocked, because then we don't have the security tools in place to monitor. And we were always already, a lot of people were already flex working, so it didn't even change that much, because people used to travel around between the different properties as well. So we were already pretty prepared. We just had to add a couple of users to set them up for remote working. But overall, we already had the tools in place.
Okay, great. And you know it?
Well, we had a huge increase compared to what was before, people working from home. And what we do is we created a tool that they can use the applications remotely. So they would need, using the checkpoint, basically they will be able to use the tools, but remotely. So they will create a kind of a sandbox where they will work. They can use their own devices, but it's through a specific connection. And when they connect to that, their devices would be kind of isolated and will not have access to the network, only to the specific tools. And those tools will be as remote applications. So they will not use, in fact, their components to their devices to work. All the processes are running on the servers.
Yeah, okay, well, this is Michael back.
Yep, sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, you left everybody.
You really added a hell of a drama to the webinar.
Okay. let's get back where you left.
Sure.
So, okay, Eugene, what are really the features that a modern email threat protection should have?
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
So, I mean, it's going to span a lot of things. You need some sort of identity protection. You'll need to have something that has URL rewriting, so that when your users inadvertently click on a link, regardless of whether that link is safe or bad, that they're protected. You know, it goes through a web proxy. It checks to make sure that the destination website is secure and safe, to make sure that they go through there. You need to have something that's accurate in, detecting malware, that has a great track record. And you need to have something that gives your users the tools that they can use to help identify what could be a fishy email or something that's malicious. Because in any security training that you do, you always know that your weakest link is your users. And no matter how much training you put your users through, there's always going to be a certain segment of your users that, they don't think that it could happen to them. They're going to click on this. They want to see the tracking receipt. They want to see something. These fishers and these bad actors are getting very smart with what they do. They're researching their targets. They're modifying their attacks to specific people, and it could be the CEOs, it could be the head of HR, and it could be an employee that's getting impersonated. And we've seen instances where an employee, somebody in facilities management, has an email sent to the HR director, says, please update my direct deposit. It's not a big payout, but when payday rolls around, that bad actor gets that deposit of his paycheck. And then it often makes that worker wondering, well, where's my money? Why did this happen? And they did nothing wrong, but it was the HR person that was phished, or was sent that identity message that said, hey, this is who I am. I need you to update this. And they didn't check. So training is paramount. So having top rate security, top rating, identification, AV, identity protection, link protection. If you do a lot of Office documents, something that can quarantine and sandbox those Office documents to make sure the macros are great, that's another great thing to have. And then follow it up with training.
What was great. You had mentioned in a previous conversation about some of the link protection, and I find that fascinating. Can you just take a second to explain how that works a little bit? Because I felt it was somewhat novel. It's not something I had seen or heard about.
Right. So link protection is the process for when an email comes into your email system. It scans the message body and it looks for links inside that body, and it rewrites or wraps those links around so that if you saw a regular email like www.microsoft.com, well, that actual link would be wrapped around and be sent to a web proxy. So when that person who receives the email gets that message, whether they click on that link right then, a week later, a year later, or they forward it to a colleague or to home, that link has been rewritten so that when someone clicks on that link, it goes to a web proxy, and they're going to get redirected for about a quarter a second or so. And these systems check the web page, the history of the web page, where it's being redirected to. It has all these statistics and all these things that it's checking to make sure that when someone gets redirected to that page, that they're essentially safe. And if they're not, if there's something malicious or there's malware on the page or something like that, well, then they are presented with a block page that says, sorry, this is not a safe link to go to. So while we train our users to look at links and make sure that they follow all these safety guidelines, the fact of the matter is it's still a very popular way to transmit malware, and it happens every day.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what are the best? Yeah, what are the best link protections out there? In your opinion, do you have a couple of examples?
Well, I mean, we have one that is actually really good. It's all created in-house, and then there's typically just a few that it seems that everyone that offers some sort of link protection service, they all sort of license the same products. So I think, you know, when you have anybody who offers it, I think you're having that layer of protection, regardless of how effective it might be over someone else. I think they're all going to have a lot of the same data, because it's a big world out there, and everybody likes to share data. It's just a matter of how you check it, how you do it, and you have some instances like in Office 365, even if you pay for their ATP service, they have a link protection service built into it. The problem that I have with that is that when they find a page that's malicious, they still provide the user with a way to bypass that block page so they can continue onto that site, which seems kind of productive to me. You would think that if you found something bad, regardless of what it is, and you say, hey, this is definitely malware that we found, we don't want the users going to it. But unfortunately, there are some services that still allow you to kind of proceed forward. But no, it's having that service and just training your users is just a huge thing.
Great. Daniel, a question from the audience that want to put any queries that you have?
Any questions? Yes. Let's see. So on your form, you're referencing let's see, that third bullet under the layered approach. Some explanation of the email validation frameworks, the SPK, DKIM, DMARC.
Well,
you know, what are they, and which ones do you guys use those, Noah and Dominic?
So the frameworks are SPF, DKIM, and MARC.
Yeah.
More specific. No, do you use them?
No, I'm not aware of them. What we do use is dual authentication for some specific account emails, but no, I'm not aware that we use this function. So.
Okay. And you, Dominic?
Yeah, I heard we've got help of specialists in setting up the tenant. So I heard them talking about it, but I don't know the exact setup. I need to check.
Okay. No, they are best practice, and if you play with all the three together, basically, first point, your email reputation goes up, and you don't risk to be flagged as spammers. Number one, and the second one is that above all the risks, yours is much harder to spoof your domain. Not impossible, but it deviates bad actors that are not super professional to attack your email. But Michael, do you want to comment on that, because you know more about that than any of us?
Sure. So SPF it's a pretty old technology, center policy framework. It basically says, hey, these are the domains, or these are the servers that are allowed to send messages from my domain.
Yeah.
And DKIM is built on top of SPF, and it helps to also ensure that the email servers that are allowed to send for your domain are sending that. And typically, if you have a third-party filtering system in there, they typically have some checks in there to say, hey, if something comes in and it has an SPF record or a DKIM record that doesn't match with the server that's sending this message, then treat it as spam or reject it or something like that. And it's just an extra security layer that you can put in to validate the sending party, right? So you're not just getting a piece of mail that comes from, hey, this looks like it comes from Microsoft, and it's offering me, X amount of dollars or whatever the currency is. And I just have to do this, and it looks legit. Everything looks great. Well, that's cool. But if everything sort of says, hey, this was not an authenticated server, not an approved server to send mail on behalf of Microsoft, well, that's a certain identifier. And then, DMARC you can specify actions to take if things aren't followed, like who to notify or where to notify. And it's just, again, it's a follow up, and it's more security around who's allowed to send with your mail or your domain. And it's something that most services offer, and you should definitely look at it if that's something you're doing, especially with Office 365. If you look in your domain settings, there's going to be records for SPF, DKIM, and DMARC that you can set up, and it's just something you put into your domain registrar.
Okay, great.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
we are at the half an hour mark. I will stay on if there are any other questions, but in respect for Dominic and Noah's time, I know you guys committed your day to be here, so I want to let you go on your merry way. I know Noah's on his vacation, so I don't want to abuse him one more minute. And Dominic is mad busy this week there in Amsterdam. So if you've got any questions, anyone that's out there, we can hang on for a few minutes. I'm sure Marco wouldn't mind staying on. I'm speaking on his behalf. Perhaps Michael can stay on, but
Sure.
We appreciate everybody attending this webinar. We will have another one coming up next month. Tentatively, the topic will be threat monitoring, and also, don't forget that we will post this so you can share some of this important information. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's just fantastic to have a conversation about this subject with you. So thanks everybody for coming to the webinar. I'll stay on, and Marco, if you can as well, if there are any questions that come through. Perfect. If there are any questions that come through, but otherwise, have a super rest of the afternoon for everyone. Appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Cheers.
See ya. If we have any questions, Sean, giving me a shout. It's not refreshing for me. Oh no, I guess there's no chat. No questions thus far.
What kind of specific information are attackers trying to obtain? Also, can you give an example of email types for people to be aware of not to open?
Do you want to try to tackle that, Michael? I didn't see that in the chat. Can you repeat that, Sean, as well for Michael?
Yes. What kind of specific information are attackers trying to obtain? Also, can you give an example of email types for people to be aware of not to open?
It's a great question. I think bad actors will take any information they can get, and I use that as a really broad term because what some people may not find valuable in their mailbox, bad actors may, and it could be something that it was a customer communication that they had dealt with that personally they may not feel any attachment to, but the bad actor sees something in there. Maybe it's an additional contact, or maybe it's a password, or a credit card number, or some sort of insurance code, something that they can use to their advantage. And you have to understand the nature of collecting data and storing it on the dark web for everyone to see, or stealing it and selling it is a very lucrative business. I mean, they may only get pennies on to each credit card number, but when they can get them in masses of millions and millions of credit card numbers, then it adds up. And I think whenever we see a mailbox that's been compromised by credentials, I think the average time for someone to actually do anything on that mailbox is roughly 60 to 90 days. So that bad actor has been in that mailbox with these stolen credentials, perusing the mailbox, creating mail rules, doing whatever they want to, exporting that data so that they have something to start with, or something that they can kind of fall back on or pull in. And that's why when you see some of these compromised accounts that have message rules created, they're very specific, they're very targeted. Messages coming from this domain, or messages that have these words in the subject or body. I mean, they're very specific in what they're looking for, because they've had time to dig through these mailboxes looking for things that they can use. And if they can't find anything of value to that bad actor, well, they'll start sending messages out to their contacts to try to get more people to bite the hook to get there.
There's your living off the land attacks. And
Absolutely.
Yep.
I've got another one here.
Yeah.
This is from Rick Martin. I think he keeps going in and offline here, but Rick had a question. Does anyone have thoughts on G Suite email safety in comparison to the other specific email providers, Exchange, etc.?
I have, because I use it. I think the principle is the same. The basic stuff is there. But if you want to really have an enterprise grade security for your email, you need to have something before the email reaches the inboxes, email trade protection platform. I think the principle is the same. For instance, I was giving the example of the email compromises using the OAuth APIs, and this is as valid as for Microsoft 365 as valid for Google Suite. That's exactly the same thing. So basically, I would say they are the same. Office 365 being more popular is more target. I think that's the only reason why you see more mention about it. But Michael, do you have any comments additional to that?
I think you're right. I think, you know, when you look at security concerns, I think you should be concerned with trusting everything to you know, the likes of Microsoft and Google, only because, you know, with their size and popularity, they're going to be one of the first systems targeted by these bad actors. They're the ones that are, you know, testing all their new attacks on all these new services, because like it or not, you know, they're extremely popular, and they have a wide variety of users, from home users all the way up to enterprise level users. So you have a potential land, I mean, just the land grab alone, if you found something that could compromise Office 365, is just unfathomable. It's a large number of users that you could have access to. So if you are the quote unquote bad actor that creates a attack that is successful in Office 365, you're going to have millions of accounts compromised in very short order.
That's correct.
And think about the bragging rights that the hacker would get by being able to pin it. You know,
oh, absolutely,
there's
absolutely.
also a motivation, right?
Yeah, and I think layering your approach, like you mentioned earlier, is definitely important. Looking at companies who specialize in these sort of fields and procedures, I think is extremely important, because they're focused on a very specific thing. And any company or any organization that focuses on one item is usually very, very good at doing that job, because that's their specialization, as opposed to, yeah, we do everything. Well, you can be a master of none and good at everything, or you can be the master of one thing and be really, really good at what you do. And I think having a company that does that very well is key for security.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Very great.
On any other questions?
No other questions in the chat currently. I think we can call this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic information, Michael. So glad you were able to join us. And
sorry for dropping out.
Don't apologize, because it added an element of drama that was you had us at hanging on, and then you just dropped out. Perfect timing if you were looking for drama.
It's amazing. I mean, the numbers alone since the beginning of the year is just ridiculous. It's, you know, 667% and over 350% just in phishing alone tells reasons why you need some sort of security, and you have to layer it.
That's an argument. Definitely. Okay.
Wow. Well, very good, fellas. Thank you again, and for those that are hanging on, thanks for being dedicated to the topic. And yeah, we appreciate it. Appreciate you being here, and see you at the next VENZA webinar.